Now, pressure is growing on the BBC to take action and finally remove Gary Lineker from their presenting lineup after repeatedly making political posts on social media.
So we're joined now by former BBC presenter Roger Bolton and the former BBC journalist and royal correspondent Michael Cole. Gentlemen, good morning to you. Roger, if we could go to you first. He appears to have, Lineker, gone too far, according to the new chairman of the BBC, Samir Shah, because he criticised personally a member of Parliament. Is that a fair assessment of why he could be in difficulties now?
I think that's right, although the BBC's own media editor, when these latest guidelines were introduced, said they were as clear as mud. I mean, there's a question of whether you think they crossed the guidelines and whether they can be proven clearly in a legal context to have done so. But I think he has. The incoming chairman thinks he has. Although the incoming chairman, if he's approved by Parliament, Samir Shah, did say it's a question of how egregious it is. But the plain fact is, if you're focused on the future of the BBC, like the Director General, you're faced with the pressures you've got under, the cuts that have just been made effectively, large cuts in BBC spending, with all the other problems you face in the Middle East. The last thing in the world you want is this story running and running and running. And if Gary, had really put the BBC and public service broadcasting first, he would have shut up. But he clearly won't. I mean, he believes these things genuinely. He's a genuine guy, but this is crazy.
Let's have a look at one of his tweets. This is one of the many tweets that Gary Lineker has sent out now on X. The quote here, there's 4 pictures of Grant Shapps. It says, "A bit rich coming from someone who can't even stick to one name, 4 chaps Shapps." And so he's suggesting that Grant Shapps has 4 different identities. I don't know whether that's true or not. The tweet that I saw... Go on, Roger.
No, sorry to interrupt you. What he's referring to there is the fact that in his previous business dealings, Mr. Shapps used 3 names which were not his own. Now, you can either say that's innocuous or whatever, but that is a reference to the fact that Mr. Shapps, as a result of Mr. Shapps using these 3 names, people may have thought there were 3 real people behind it. In fact, only Mr. Shapps was behind it. But the point about that is that, this is pretty much an attack on an individual, which I think the guidelines say.
Yeah, and that's where I think. And also the other one was Jonathan Gullis MP, who basically tweeted to say that Gary Lineker, another breach of the BBC's impartiality rules. Sadly, spineless Tim Davie will do nothing about it, having surrendered to Lineker previously. And Gary Lineker retweeted that, Michael Cole, and he said, Jonathan hasn't read the new guidelines, or should I say, had someone read them to him. They're just sort of childish, insulting spats, aren't they? And of course, the BBC's social media rules. Just to bottom this out, Michael, as to what he might have done, the BBC social media rules say you are not allowed to criticise the character of individual politicians in the UK. That's precisely what he did do, Michael.
Good morning, Beverly. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Roger. The BBC needs to get a grip. It has adopted a completely craven posture in the face of Mr. Lineker, now and before. Quite clearly, he has transcended the guidelines by making personal attacks on MPs. And it's more than that. He is the highest paid person at the BBC, on the screen or anywhere else. And that comes with it a responsibility to act in a way that does not compromise the BBC's political neutrality, because without that, its reasons for being cease to exist. It's quite abject, the way the BBC has behaved in this situation. They should take action. They made Gary Lineker. He was a loquacious footballer. They made him into a star. In the old days, when Roger was there, they used to make stars. If you didn't, people moved on.
Go on.
Somebody else.
Go on, Roger Bolton. Let's bring you in. 1 second, Michael.
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to be honest, Gary Lineker made himself a star by being the most wonderful footballer who could score the most fabulous goals, and also he's an excellent presenter, and he does work. Look, for other channels, there's a real principle here, which is the collision of principles, isn't there? There's the freedom of speech, the right to freedom of speech, which you champion properly and you use on your programme. And then there's the obligation of the BBC to be impartial. And there's no difficulty with news and current affairs. The rules are very clear. You don't comment. If you do in this way, you're out. That's the way it should be.
Here's the bit, Roger, just help me understand this. Is Gary Lineker worth the stress to the BBC and the money? All he is now is a footballer from many years ago who can read a piece to camera and have a little chat about football. It's not that complicated, Roger. What does he still bring to the channel?
Oh, well, Beverly, you say anybody could do your job?
Anyone could do this job. Oh, I tell you what.
Listen, Roger, I'm offering to do it for a third of the money.
But why him? But I mean, listen, the Premier League comes through dozens, hundreds of footballers every year. There's got to be someone.
Let me answer your question. There's a separate question about whether he's paid too much. I agree with you, he is. But in terms of his abilities, he's a brilliant footballer. He really understands football. He's a very good analyst. He's charming, and he's a very excellent presenter. He must be one of the best presenters. Now, I still don't think he's worth the money, but that's why he's in the job. And do you want the best presenters on the BBC? On the whole, you do. But there's a price, and the price is too high in terms of what he's paid, and the price is too high now in what he's saying on air. So I think it's unfortunate in the case that he and the BBC will have to part. Now, I think it's sad, and I say Gary's genuine in his beliefs, but he's actually, I think, let the BBC down.
Yeah. Michael, just last quick word to you, Michael Cole. He's just acts with impunity. How much longer can he carry on?
Well, it depends whether the BBC has got any backbone, whether Samir Shah is confirmed as the chairman. He seems to have a dim view of all this. You know, the BBC used to make its own stars and it used to act accordingly. If Gary Lineker has political views, there's always Speaker's Corner. He can buy a placard, he can take part in a demonstration, but he mustn't use the prestige of the BBC to forward his political views. It's quite as simple as that. If I can just say very, very briefly, I worked for the BBC for 20 years, more than a fifth of its existence. I filed thousands of reports, thousands, and I never expressed one political opinion or a personal opinion. And in all that time...
But you work in news and current affairs, and that's the distinction I don't accept. Gary does not, which makes it more difficult.
Roger, and I was the most I was ever paid in a year, in 1987, was £47,000. I believed in what I was doing.
Okay.
I was beaten up in Belfast.
That's a lot.
I was fired at.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Right.
Gentlemen. Round three another time.
Yeah.
Another time, gentlemen.
We can't go into overtime. We've already gone into overtime. We can't have a penalty shoot-off as well. Thanks so much, Roger Bolton.
And Michael Cole.